Imagine this. You're lying in bed, your mind drifting into the depths of sleep, when suddenly, a strange sound breaks the silence. It's a faint, distant beep, repetitive, yet oddly persistent. At first, you think it's part of some bizarre dream. But then it doesn't stop. The sound grows louder, more distinct, and it's unmistakably real. The camera zooms in slowly on the protagonist's face, eyes wide open, staring into the pitch-black void of the room, heart pounding. The fear creeping in is palpable, a primal feeling that crawls up the spine and settles in the pit of the stomach. It's not your mind playing tricks. It's something else. Something watching. Something waiting. The suspense builds as the viewer is drawn into the eerie atmosphere, where every shadow seems to stretch unnaturally, and every creak of the house seems to carry an ominous message. The protagonist struggles to focus, their eyes darting nervously around the room as if seeking an escape, but the only movement is the relentless beep that refuses to stop. A chilling pause ensues, and then the narrator adds, "What would you do if the sound turned out to be real? If instead of a nightmare it was a warning? A warning that something in the house isn't as it seems." The room suddenly feels colder, the temperature dropping as if the air itself is thickening with dread. The protagonist finally stirs, torn between curiosity and fear, their body aching from the weight of an impending terror they can't quite comprehend. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to go back to sleep, but I knew deep down that ignoring it would mean something far worse. The camera follows their every hesitant step as they make their way down the darkened hallway, the beep growing louder, more insistent, like it's beckoning them toward an unknown horror. Do you dare follow the sound? Do you risk everything to uncover what lurks in the shadows of your own home? The protagonist's every footstep echoes through the house, amplifying the suspense, as the camera slowly zooms in on their trembling hand, reaching for the doorknob. A cold sweat forms on their forehead, their breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. The tension is unbearable, and the viewer is pulled into the fear, heart racing, unsure whether the protagonist will make it to the source of the sound, or whether the source has already found them. If you're ready to face what lies beyond the veil of reality, hit that like button. Subscribe to Sinister Stories, and share this with your friends, because not all horrors remain in the dark. The screen cuts to black with the sound of the eerie beep echoing into the void, leaving the audience on edge, craving more of the chilling tale that awaits. Its windows are cracked and covered in grime, the kind that makes you wonder if the light of day has ever touched them. The walls seem to lean inward, as though the house is pressing its secrets against its very skin, suffocating in the silence of neglect. The air is thick, damp, and carries the smell of mildew and age. It's the kind of place you wouldn't dare enter after sunset, but here, in the dead of night, it's alive with an unsettling energy. The protagonist moves cautiously through the hall, each step an echo in the oppressive stillness, reverberating off the peeling wallpaper and sagging beams. The wooden floorboards creak beneath their weight, protesting every movement. It's the kind of house where shadows cling to corners and dust floats like specters in the air, disturbed only by the occasional draft that seems to have a mind of its own. The house groans and shifts, a constant reminder that it's never truly still. The protagonist pauses, staring down the narrow corridor that leads to the kitchen. The walls on either side are adorned with faded portraits of long-forgotten faces, their hollow eyes following the protagonist with an unnerving gaze. The eyes seem too lifelike, too real, as if they are silently observing every step, waiting for something, anything, to break the monotony of their long, stagnant existence. The kitchen at the end of the hall is cloaked in shadow. The only light comes from the dim, sickly glow of a street lamp seeping through a cracked window above the sink. The clock on the wall ticks loudly, almost mocking the stillness. Time seems to move slower here, as if the house itself is dragging its feet, unwilling to let the hours pass too quickly. The floor is cold underfoot, the tile cracked in places, with streaks of grime settled deep into the grout. The faint smell of old food lingers in the air, mixing with something else, something metallic, like the smell of blood or rusted iron. The microwave sits in the corner, its metallic surface dull in the faint light, almost blending into the shadows that seem to pool around it. It's the only appliance in the room that doesn't seem to belong, a modern intrusion into an otherwise forgotten place. The walls, the furniture, the worn-out curtains, all seem frozen in time, relics of a bygone era, but the microwave feels out of place, like it doesn't belong in a house that hasn't seen proper life in years. And yet it hums softly, almost imperceptibly, as if it too is waiting. There's a strange energy in the room, one that hangs in the air like static electricity, making the hairs on the back of the protagonist's neck stand up. It's in the way the light flickers, the way the shadows seem to twitch and writhe in the corner of their vision. There's something alive in the house, something that wasn't there before. The protagonist can feel it, creeping just beyond the threshold of their awareness, just out of reach but ever present. The air grows colder, and a draft sweeps through, rattling the windows. It's the kind of cold that chills you to the bone, sinking into your skin and freezing you in place. As the protagonist moves closer to the kitchen, they catch a glimpse of something unsettling. A shadow that flits across the floor, moving with an unnatural grace. It's fleeting, but enough to make the blood freeze in their veins. The microwave continues to hum, its presence suddenly overwhelming. The quiet, broken atmosphere of the house has shifted, and what was once merely uncomfortable is now suffused with a malignant presence, one that feels hostile, threatening. The house is no longer just an old, abandoned place, it's a trap. A place that holds its secrets tightly, refusing to let go. The camera lingers on the hallway leading back to the rest of the house, where every door remains closed, every room untouched, as if daring the protagonist to venture further, to uncover what lies behind them. The stillness is oppressive, suffocating. There is no escape. Something watches from the darkness. The house is alive in its own twisted way, its walls steeped in memories of forgotten fears, its floors echoing with the weight of unseen presences. And in that moment, the protagonist feels it, the undeniable truth that they are not alone. The silence of the house is suffocating, pressing in on the protagonist with each breath they take. The hum of the microwave grows louder, now filling the entire room with its soft, mechanical drone. But it's not the microwave alone that is unsettling. It's the subtle changes in the atmosphere, the faint, almost imperceptible noises that begin to fill the air, like whispers carried on the wind. A scraping sound, barely audible, comes from somewhere deep within the house. At first, it could be dismissed as the house settling, the usual groans of an old structure. But this sound, it's different. It's deliberate. It's as if something is moving, something that shouldn't be moving, stirring in the dark corners of the house. The protagonist's eyes dart nervously around the kitchen, searching for the source of the noise, but the room remains empty. Yet, the sensation that they are being watched grows stronger by the second. It starts as a prickle at the back of their neck, the hairs rising in instinctive terror. Then, as they step closer to the microwave, the temperature seems to drop, an unnatural chill seeping into the air, making their breath visible in the dim light. It's sudden and harsh, as though a window has been thrown open, though none are. The air is thick, damp with an oppressive coldness that seeps through their clothes, biting into their skin. It's not the kind of cold that's from the weather. It feels unnatural, almost as if the room itself is breathing, exhaling a suffocating frost. A soft thud echoes from the far corner of the room, almost drowned out by the beeping of the microwave. It's the sound of something shifting, something that shouldn't be moving. The protagonist freezes, heart pounding in their chest. The beeping of the microwave continues, now faster, more erratic, like a countdown, each beep growing more insistent, more frantic. But it's the sound from the corner of the room that sends an ice-cold wave of dread over them. There, lying forgotten on the counter, is a small object, a spoon. It's been there for hours, untouched, but now, it's moving. Slowly. Gently. At first, it slides an inch across the counter, as if being pushed by invisible hands. The protagonist's breath catches in their throat. They blink, certain their eyes are playing tricks on them. But when they look again, the spoon has moved another inch, dragging itself across the surface with a disturbing, silent grace. The movement is subtle, but it's undeniable. And with it comes a sense of dread so strong, so paralyzing, that the protagonist feels rooted to the spot, unable to look away. The hairs on their arms stand straight up, and the temperature seems to drop even further, as though the very air is suffused with the weight of something malicious. The kitchen light flickers above, once, twice, before it dims completely, leaving only the faintest glow from the street lamp outside to illuminate the room. The microwave continues to beep, but the sound is now distant, as if coming from another time or place, disconnected from the reality of the kitchen. Everything feels out of place. The shadows in the corners of the room stretch unnaturally, as though they are reaching toward the protagonist, seeking to consume them. Then a low whisper, barely audible, slithers into the room, a voice that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The words are distorted, indecipherable, but there's no mistaking the tone. It's cold, malevolent, and it's right there in the room with them. The whisper intensifies, growing louder as if trying to be heard over the relentless beeping of the microwave. The protagonist's pulse quickens. Their breathing becomes shallow, panicked. They take a step back, then another, the spoon still sliding across the counter behind them, as though following their every movement. But it's the whisper that does it. It's the voice that makes their heart race, that sends a wave of terror crashing over them. The sensation of being watched grows unbearable. The shadows seem to close in around the protagonist, growing thicker, darker. The room feels smaller, constricting, suffocating. They try to turn away to escape, but their feet feel heavy, as though they're being pulled back toward the source of the sound. The microwave continues to hum, louder now, vibrating the walls, shaking the floor beneath their feet. The temperature drops even further, until they can see their breath, visible in the air, like smoke rising from a fire long extinguished. The silence that follows is suffocating, but it's the kind of silence that doesn't feel safe. It's the kind of silence that precedes something terrible. The whispers stop. The spoon stops moving. The microwave falls silent. And in that sudden stillness, the protagonist realizes that something has changed. They are not alone in the room. Something is here, watching, waiting, and it's closer than they ever imagined. The silence after the whisper feels unbearable, like the very air has thickened around the protagonist, pressing in from all sides. The microwave has stopped beeping, but its hum lingers in the background, a faint vibration in the walls that can still be felt under the skin. The spoon has stopped moving, but the eerie presence of its unnatural slide across the counter remains in the protagonist's mind. They stand there, frozen in place, staring at the spoon that seems so innocent, so mundane. Yet, it now feels like a cursed object, a harbinger of something far more sinister. Every second feels stretched, heavy with the weight of uncertainty, the dread of what might come next. The room seems to close in on them, the shadows in the corners of the kitchen stretching longer and darker, as though they are alive, waiting to pounce. The protagonist's mind races, torn between disbelief and terror. This can't be real, they think, but the coldness in the air, the whispers that still echo faintly in their ears, the overwhelming sense of something lurking just beyond their vision, none of it can be dismissed. Their body is trembling, heart racing in their chest, the terror paralyzing. The decision lies before them. Should they leave, retreat to the safety of their bed, ignore what they've seen, and pretend it's just a nightmare? Or should they face whatever is haunting this place, whatever force is playing these twisted games, and confront the unknown, no matter the cost? A wave of nausea hits them as they take an unsteady step backward, unsure of where to go, where to hide. Their mind is a whirlpool of conflicting thoughts. The safe choice is to run, to escape, to never look back. But deep down, the curiosity claws at them. They feel it, an overwhelming urge to understand, to solve this nightmare, to uncover the truth behind the sounds, the movements, the whispering presence that haunts this house. It's a feeling so visceral, it's as if it has gripped their very soul. The protagonist's breathing quickens, shallow gasps echoing in the room. Every instinct tells them to turn around, to flee, to shut the door behind them and pretend this never happened. But something inside them refuses. There is a need, no, a compulsion, to find answers, to face what's lurking in the shadows. If I leave now, I'll never know what this is, they think, their heart pounding in their ears. If I leave now, it will always haunt me. The shadows in the corners of the room seem to grow thicker, more substantial, as if the walls themselves are alive, waiting to devour the light. The kitchen feels colder, the temperature dropping even further, and the whispers start again, faint at first, but growing louder, more distinct. The words are still indecipherable, yet their tone is clear, threatening, demanding, as though it's calling to them, daring them to step forward. Every inch the protagonist takes toward the source of the sound feels like a step deeper into the unknown, into the darkness that waits. Is it worth it? They ask themselves. The fear in their chest is unbearable, a gut-wrenching panic that almost paralyzes them. And yet, the curiosity, the hunger for answers, pulls them forward. The conflict rages within them, every step a battle between fear and the need to know. The decision is made, not by logic, but by an instinct they can't control. They take a slow, tentative step toward the corner of the kitchen, toward the source of the unnatural cold, the place where the shadows twist and writhe like living things. The microwave now stands silent, but the air around it seems alive, charged with an energy that feels almost electric. A strange, oppressive force presses down on the protagonist, weighing on their chest, making it harder to breathe. The whispers grow louder, filling the air, until the protagonist can almost hear the words clearly. "Come closer," the voice hisses, cold and cruel. It feels like a command. The protagonist's mind screams at them to stop, to turn and run, but their feet move forward on their own, drawn to the dark corner, to the place where the shadows linger with a mind of their own. The moment they step into the shadows, the temperature plummets even further. A sudden gust of cold air rushes past them, like a gust of wind from an open grave. The walls seem to close in, the room shifting around them as though reality itself is warping. The protagonist's pulse races in their ears, drowning out all other sounds, until all that remains is the oppressive, suffocating silence. But it's not really silence, is it? No. The whispers continue, just beneath the surface, louder now and closer. They can feel it, the presence, watching, waiting. Every step forward feels like they are walking into the unknown, walking towards something they cannot escape, no matter how far they run. The fear is overwhelming, but it's too late to turn back now. The decision has been made. The protagonist has chosen to face whatever it is that haunts this place. The terror, the mystery, the unknown. It's all closing in, and there's no turning back. The moment the protagonist steps further into the darkness of the kitchen corner, the atmosphere changes. The air becomes thick, oppressive, as though something ancient and malevolent has stirred awake, just waiting for them. Every step they take seems to echo in the silence, yet it feels as though someone, is right behind them, breathing down their neck. The darkness feels alive, pressing in from all sides, twisting the very fabric of reality. The temperature has dropped to a bone-chilling level, the cold seeping into their skin, freezing their very blood. The microwave, silent now, seems to loom like a dark sentinel in the corner, its empty cavity staring back at them as though it's waiting for something to happen. The shadows seem to grow deeper here, curling around the edges of the room like tendrils of smoke. It's not the kind of darkness that can be explained by the absence of light. It feels wrong, as if the very space around them is bending and warping, as if the laws of nature have been temporarily suspended. The protagonist can't shake the feeling that the walls are closing in, that something is moving just beyond their reach, something that has been lying in wait for them to arrive. And then it happens. A soft rustling sound fills the room, so faint that at first, they wonder if it's just their mind playing tricks. But it grows louder, more deliberate, the sound of something shifting, something crawling. The protagonist's eyes snap to the microwave, now a dark void against the dim light, its presence suffocating. And then, from the shadows, emerges a shape. At first, it's barely perceptible, a slight movement in the darkness, just at the edge of their vision. But as they focus, the shape becomes clearer. A figure, standing unnaturally still, watching. The figure is human, but not quite. Its form is distorted, its features blurred and shifting, as though it's made of shadow itself, constantly flickering and changing. The air around it seems to warp, the shadows bending unnaturally in its presence. Its eyes are the only constant, a pair of empty, black orbs that seem to swallow the light around them. No pupils, no whites, just endless black voids. The figure's gaze locks onto the protagonist, and the room feels like it's spinning out of control. The air becomes heavy with dread, the kind of terror that claws at the soul, making it hard to breathe. It feels as though the figure is not merely watching, but reading every thought, every fear they've ever had. The microwave behind the figure starts to hum again, louder now, more insistent, the sound reverberating through the kitchen like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. The protagonist's heart races as they realize the figure is moving towards them, slowly, with an unnatural glide. The floor beneath their feet seems to vibrate with every movement it makes, as though the house itself is trembling in fear. The figure's face, if it could be called a face, seems to shift, its features twisting into something more grotesque, more monstrous with every passing second. The whispers start again, louder this time, no longer distorted but clear and sharp. "You shouldn't have come," the voice hisses, cold and rasping, as if it is coming from the very walls of the house. "You should have turned back." The figure inches closer, its presence overwhelming, suffocating. The protagonist tries to step back, but their feet feel like they're stuck in quicksand, unable to move. Panic surges through them, their breath coming in short, shallow gasps, but no matter how hard they try to run, their body won't obey. The room is spinning, the shadows swirling around them, as the figure inches closer still, the black orbs of its eyes burning into their soul. The microwave's hum grows louder, its beeping more frantic, as if it's feeding off the terror in the air. The very walls of the kitchen seem to be vibrating, shaking with an unseen force. The shadows around the figure lengthen, twisting and curling like serpents, their forms now almost tangible, reaching for the protagonist. The figure reaches out with its long, skeletal hand, its fingers elongated and warped, ending in claws that scrape against the floor as it advances. In a sudden movement, the figure lunges, and the world goes completely black. The protagonist feels cold, cold like they've never felt before. Not just in their bones, but in their very core, as though their soul is being frozen, being pulled into a void where light and warmth can never reach. They gasp for air, but it feels like there is none to breathe. The darkness consumes them entirely, and for a moment, they feel as though they are nothing, no longer part of this world, trapped in a place where nothing exists but endless terror. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the figure disappears, vanishing into the shadows, leaving only the faintest trace of its presence behind. The microwave falls silent. The temperature begins to rise once more, but the fear remains, hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. The protagonist stands there, heart racing, hands trembling, their minds struggling to make sense of what they just witnessed. They can't shake the feeling that the nightmare is far from over, that whatever that thing was, it isn't finished with them yet. The darkness still lingers, thick and oppressive, like a shroud that refuses to lift. The kitchen feels even colder now, the shadows more twisted, more alive. The protagonist knows one thing for sure. They've seen something that cannot be explained, something that exists outside of reason, outside of reality itself. And that presence is still here, still watching. The kitchen, once a place of comfort, now feels like a tomb. The protagonist's heartbeat reverberates in their ears, drowning out the lingering hum of the microwave. The shadows, once simply dark corners, have turned into oppressive forces that push against the walls, stretching toward them like hungry fingers. The air is thickened once again, colder, denser, pressing down on their chest, making each breath feel labored, like the very atmosphere itself is conspiring to suffocate them. They feel it before they hear it, the growing unease, like the air has shifted. Something is coming. Something is about to happen, and they can't stop it. They know it in their gut, an instinct that tells them to run, to escape, but their feet remain frozen, trapped by a force they can't comprehend. The figure that had once vanished into the shadows is back, only now, it's not just standing there. It's moving, crawling across the walls, distorting the very space around it, as if the kitchen itself is warping and bending under its presence. The walls pulse, the floor groans beneath their feet, and the whispers return, louder now, almost deafening. "You should have left," the voice hisses again, cold and venomous, curling through the air like smoke. The figure's shape flickers, distorting with every movement, its form twisting into something less human and more other, a being made of pure malice. Its black eyes burn with an intensity that can be felt in the very marrow of their bones, a gaze that pierces through them, making them feel naked, exposed, as if every hidden fear is laid bare. A chill runs down the protagonist's spine, and they realize, with growing horror, that the microwave is no longer merely malfunctioning. It is part of this. The beeping has changed, now alternating with an eerie, high-pitched whine, an unnatural frequency that scrapes against the brain, like nails on a chalkboard. The microwave door opens by itself, slowly, with a mechanical whir that sounds almost too deliberate. Inside, the protagonist sees something else, not food, not leftovers, but something darker. Something alive. A black, viscous substance begins to ooze from the microwave's interior, dripping slowly onto the counter. It doesn't move like liquid, though. It slithers, almost as if it has a life of its own. The substance forms shapes, twisting into grotesque patterns that make the protagonist's stomach churn, as if the microwave is giving birth to some kind of grotesque, living entity. The room suddenly feels smaller, as if the very walls are closing in, squeezing the life out of the protagonist. They can hear the whispers now, clearer than ever, dozens of voices overlapping, each one murmuring in a different language, different tongues. The words are unintelligible, but they are filled with such malice, such overwhelming hatred, that it makes the protagonist's skin crawl. Every whisper seems to claw at their mind, burrowing into their thoughts, making them question what is real and what is not. They feel their sanity slipping away, like sand through their fingers, unable to grasp hold of anything that feels safe, familiar. The figure moves closer, gliding toward them with unnatural speed. Its limbs elongate and twist, stretching impossibly long, like the shadows themselves are feeding on the figure's malice. The protagonist tries to move, but their body refuses to obey, rooted to the spot by an unseen force, as if something is holding them in place. Their breathing becomes shallow, desperate, as the figure towers over them. The figure opens its mouth, a gaping hole filled with darkness, and the voices from the microwave pour out, whispering things no human should ever hear. It's too late, the figure rasps. It's already inside you. The revelation hits the protagonist like a physical blow. It was never just the house. It was never just the microwave. The house, the shadows, the figure, they were all connected, a part of something older, something that feeds on fear, on the souls of the living. The protagonist realizes, with growing dread, that this house has been waiting for them. That it's not merely haunted, it's alive, and it has been for centuries. A place where things from beyond the veil of reality have found a home, and now, it wants to claim them, to drag them into the darkness that waits beyond the walls. The floor beneath them begins to tremble, the very ground shaking as if the house is coming alive around them, preparing to devour them whole. The shadows begin to stretch toward them, reaching, grabbing, pulling them into the dark abyss that seems to open beneath their feet. The protagonist fights against the pull, trying to scream, to fight, but the force is too strong. The whispers grow louder, deafening now, as the figure leans in closer, its cold breath brushing against their skin. And then, just as the darkness consumes them, there is a moment of clarity. The microwave, the source of this terror, is the key. It is the anchor, the vessel that holds the spirits, the memories, the essence of whatever is haunting this place. And with that realization comes a surge of adrenaline. The protagonist struggles against the force, gathering every ounce of strength left within them, their hands trembling as they lunge forward, reaching for the microwave, desperate to stop the madness before it pulls them under. With a final, desperate effort, they rip the microwave's door shut, severing the connection to whatever evil had been feeding from it. The house groans, the walls rattling as if in pain, and the figure lets out a blood-curdling scream as it is pulled back into the shadows. The room, for the first time since the terror began, falls silent. The oppressive weight in the air lifts, but the silence is not comforting, it's unnerving. The protagonist stands, gasping for breath, their body trembling, their mind reeling from the horrors they have just witnessed. But as the silence stretches, the microwave's hum starts again, faint at first, then louder. The beeping returns, insistent like a countdown. And this time, it's not just the microwave that's alive, it's the entire house. And it's waiting for them to make a choice. The silence that follows is unnatural, more unsettling than the cacophony of terror that preceded it. The protagonist stands frozen in the middle of the kitchen, hands shaking, their breath ragged and shallow. The room feels hollow now, as though something vital has been sucked out of it, leaving nothing but the heavy weight of fear that presses against their chest. The shadows, still thick and oppressive, linger in the corners of the room, but they no longer feel like merely shadows. They feel alive, like hungry, lurking entities waiting for the right moment to pounce. The microwave's soft hum continues to echo through the kitchen, though it no longer holds the same ominous weight it once did. It is quieter now, almost innocent in its simplicity, as if the malevolent presence that once made it an instrument of terror has withdrawn. But there is something far worse beneath this illusion of calm. The protagonist can feel it in their gut, a gnawing certainty that whatever was unleashed here has not been fully contained. The feeling crawls up their spine, tightening around their throat. The terror, it seems, is merely lying in wait. They glance toward the door, their only path to escape, but their legs feel heavy, their feet unwilling to move. The kitchen stretches before them like a void, and yet, for some inexplicable reason, it feels wrong to leave. It's as if something is keeping them here, holding them in place, unwilling to let them walk away untouched. The shadows in the corners seem to move, slowly, inch by inch, creeping closer, as though they are stalking the protagonist's every move. A sharp, sudden sound breaks the oppressive silence, an unmistakable creak of the floorboards behind them, followed by the sound of something scraping lightly across the tiles. The protagonist's heart skips a beat. Slowly they turn, the motion feeling impossibly slow, as if their body is resisting them. The floor creaks again, this time louder, and then there it is, the unmistakable glint of a reflective surface. The microwave, now dead silent, is no longer just a machine. It has transformed, its surface warped and contorted, reflecting something, someone else in the kitchen with them. The reflection in the microwave's glass is not their own. It's a shadowy figure, dark and undefined, but with eyes that gleam unnaturally bright, staring back at them from within the reflection. The figure doesn't move, it just watches, unblinking, with a knowing, predatory gaze that sends a spike of pure dread through the protagonist's chest. They feel the presence behind them, a cold, creeping sensation crawling up their back like fingers brushing against their skin. The figure in the reflection begins to smile. A slow, unsettling curl of its lips, as if it knows something the protagonist doesn't, something unspeakably terrible. The protagonist's breath catches in their throat as they try to turn away, to escape the reflection, but their body refuses to obey. Their gaze is locked with the figure in the glass, their eyes wide with terror, unable to look away. The smile widens grotesquely, and the figure steps forward, moving closer to the microwave's surface as if emerging from the shadows themselves. The world around the protagonist begins to shift again, the kitchen warping, distorting. The floor beneath their feet feels unstable, and the air grows thick with an invisible pressure. It's suffocating. The figure behind them, now more solid, begins to take form, its shape emerging from the darkness like a nightmare given flesh. The shadows around it pulse and breathe, as if they are part of the figure itself, feeding off the fear radiating from the protagonist's trembling body. Not yet, the voice comes again, cold and chilling, dripping with malevolent amusement. It's not over. The protagonist's pulse races, their thoughts scatter. Panic grips their chest, but they force their legs to move, a desperate, frantic shuffle toward the door. Their mind screams at them to run, to flee, but their body betrays them, frozen, unable to comprehend the reality unfolding before them. The door, the only way out, feels impossibly far, like a horizon that keeps retreating as they draw closer to it. The figure behind them doesn't move. It watches, silent, waiting. And just as the protagonist reaches the door, the very last moment of escape, the figure speaks again, its voice more a presence than sound, reverberating deep within their skull. "You will never escape," it whispers. With a force they cannot understand, the door slams shut in front of them. The room, the house itself, seems to breathe, the walls contracting and expanding, warping with an unholy energy. The shadows in the room move with a mind of their own, pulling the protagonist back toward the center of the kitchen, their limbs unwilling to obey. The figure in the microwave reflection grows larger, its smile now twisted in malice. A realization hits them like a jolt of electricity. This is no longer their home. This place, this house, is its own entity, a being that feeds on fear, on despair. And the protagonist is its prey, trapped in a never-ending cycle, caught in a world where the rules of reality have been bent and broken. The protagonist screams, but no sound escapes their lips. The shadows engulf them completely, and the microwave's hum grows louder, vibrating through the very fabric of the house. And in the deepest recesses of their mind, a whisper returns, softer now, but just as chilling. It's only just begun. And then, the darkness takes them, the house swallowing them whole, leaving only the faintest traces of a story that no one would believe. The house stands still, its broken windows staring out into the empty, moonless night like hollow eyes. The echoes of the night's horrors seem to hang in the air, still vibrating in the walls, still clinging to the very foundation of the house. But the protagonist is gone, and the kitchen, once the battleground for terror, is now silent. The shadows that once twisted and writhed around the room now seem to settle into their places, as though the malevolent force that plagued the house has retreated, leaving behind only an oppressive stillness that fills every corner, every crack in the walls. The protagonist never made it out. No one knows exactly what happened to them that night. The house was abandoned, the doors locked from the inside, and the windows boarded up as if in an attempt to keep whatever horrors lurked within from escaping. But there were whispers, strange rumors that began to spread through the town. People claimed they heard voices coming from the house in the dead of night, soft whispers carried on the wind, so faint that they could barely make out the words. Some swore they saw shadows moving behind the windows, figures that flickered in and out of existence, as though they were part of the house itself. And then there was the microwave. It was still there, untouched, sitting in the same corner of the kitchen, where the protagonist had faced the unimaginable. Its door was closed, its surface covered in a thin layer of dust, but the hum, the quiet, eerie hum, was still there. Even the town's bravest souls who ventured near the house late at night reported hearing it, faintly, as if it was calling them, beckoning them closer to the darkness that had consumed the protagonist. Weeks passed, then months. The house continued to stand, decaying slowly, but it never felt truly empty. The stories didn't fade. They grew. People stopped passing by the house altogether, too afraid to even glance in its direction. The air around it seemed to grow colder, denser, as if the very land surrounding it was poisoned. The once welcoming street, now eerily silent, became a place that no one wanted to be after sunset. No one dared to speak of the house, but everyone knew the stories. They spread like wildfire, from one terrified person to another, until the tale of the protagonist's final night became more than just a rumor. It became a legend. The whispers still linger in the air. They travel from house to house, from town to town, always growing darker, always feeding on the fear of those who hear them. The house is never truly forgotten. It's as though its very presence is etched into the town's history, like a scar that can never heal, a reminder of the horror that once lived within its walls. And the microwave? It remains there, standing still in the kitchen, its door now cracked open ever so slightly. The reflection in the glass is faint, but if you look close enough, you might catch a glimpse of something. A shadow, a figure, someone or something watching from within. If you stand too long, you might even hear it again, the soft beep, the whisper of the microwave calling to you from the depths of the house. A sound that drags you toward it, that tempts you, pulls you into the nightmare that never truly ends. Because the truth is, the house is still alive. The terror, the malevolent force that resides within its walls, hasn't gone anywhere. It's waiting, watching, and it always knows when someone dares to step too close. The protagonist's fate is sealed within the house, and theirs is not the only soul to be lost within its dark embrace. The house knows no end. It never forgets, and those who seek the truth, those who try to uncover its secrets, are doomed to face the same terror. The microwave hums again, faintly deep in the night, and somewhere in the distance you can hear a soft whisper, as though the house is calling you by name.